All right, so that was a little evil. I left off on number 10 telling you to pause it, and then the video ended. Yeah, we're ready for part 3 of this, or part 2 of this, I should say, going into the multi-step, which is going to do distributive property. So let's finish out 10 for those of you guys that were stuck hanging on the last video. First thing we do is combine the 9 and -4, which gave us 5z. Then we rewrote -5 equals -5. Now, when you add the 5 across, it dropped it out and made it 0. So I had 5z equals 0 for my new equation. Now we had to divide both sides by 5, which giving me z equals 0. All right, if you got that, excellent job. Sorry about making you leave on a cliffhanger, but you guys are good. So let's look at the next one. I want to go on to page number 11. So in number 11, on page 11, excuse me, we're going to start on number 11. This is going to be talking about 2 steps. Now remember, distributive property really is multiplication. So when you talk about this, and I'm going to call this part 2, so that way you know this is the second half of chapter 1, section 2. We basically are using a distributive effect. Now, distributive property is something we will talk about throughout the year. So as we go through, I will constantly say, do you remember we used distributive property, or what property are we going to use now? So distributive property is basically the ability to multiply in more than one step. So there's 2 multiplications we're going to do here with the same number, basically, which later on you're going to learn factoring is our friend also. Okay, so how do we do this problem? Super simple, super easy. Keep your mind open. Here we go. 3 is held by multiplication on the outside of this parenthesis. So to undo it, we're going to multiply each one. Now, I like to show what I call little phalanges. Reach out and touch each number or multiply by each number. Since we don't know what z is, we're just going to keep that 3z for right now. 3 times 7 is positive 21 equals 21. Now, we have our equation distributed. Step 2 is exactly what we've been doing. So I'm going to take and isolate z by subtracting 21 across. Now, just like number 10, you're going to get 0 again. So whenever we divide by a number into 0, we still stay 0. So z equals 0 once again. Now, this is not something that happens all the time. It just feels like it. Okay, so let's look at number 13. So at number 13, we have 33 equals 12r minus 3 parentheses 9 minus r. Okay, there is a lot here. Once again, we need to look at a couple things. We're using distributive property. Now, in the last one, it was a positive 3. I didn't have to put the plus sign there. We knew we were doing the positive. But in this case, do you see how we have a subtraction sign right there? That subtraction sign means that 3 is technically negative. So when we distribute in, we're actually multiplying each one of them by a -3. So please be careful when you rewrite this that you don't miss that negative sign. So I'm a big believer in rewriting this situation. So I have 33, 12r minus 27 plus 3r. Okay, take a moment. Do you see where I got all my numbers? Good. Now let's do our next step. So just like before, the 12 and the 3 is going to make 15r. This is minus 27, and this over here is going to be 33. Now, to get the r isolated once again, we're going to take and do the opposite. So the opposite of subtraction is addition. So I have 60 equals 15r. So the last step of the game is going to be the opposite. So what is the opposite of multiplication? Good job, division. So we're going to divide by 15. So in this case, we're going to have 4 equals r. Or remember, we can rewrite this as r equals 4. Do not worry about switching the variable until the end. It will keep you from making sign errors and other such things if you're jumping back and forth. All right, let's try number 14, and then we're going to look at the 3-story problems that we have. So number 14, we have 7 plus 3 times the grouping 2g minus 6 equals negative 29. Excellent. Now let's look at what we're distributing through. Last time we had a negative 3 we were carrying through. This time we have a positive 3. So we're going to distribute the positive 3 through. So rewrite this, 7 plus 6g minus 18 equals negative 29. Now that we have the distributive property done, let's take and do some combining like terms. So I'm going to combine these two. So this right here is going to give me negative 11 plus 6g. Now that we have the two new coefficients taken and put together, let's take and get the negative 11 and 29 put together. Now to do that, remember we're going to cross the equal sign with the negative 11, so it has to change from instead of negative to a positive. And so instead of subtraction, it is addition. Remember, we're talking about opposites when you're going across from an equal sign. So I now have 6g equals negative 18. The last phase of this is going to be doing the opposite of multiplication, which is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 6. So g equals negative 3. All right, good job. So the last 3 things we have to look at are the 3-story problems, number 15, 16, and 17. So it says you can represent an odd integer with an expression of 2n plus 1, where n is any integer. Write and solve an equation to find 3 consecutive odd integers that have the sum of 63. Okay, so we have 3 consecutive odd integers. Let's write out our equation. Okay, to start with, it said you can represent an odd integer with the expression of n plus 1. The plus 1 is the first one. So to write this, we're going to have 2n plus 1. To get to the second one, we have to add another odd integer. So if we're going to add another odd integer, instead of having plus 2, it's going to have to be plus 3. And then since it said we're looking for 3 consecutive odds, we're going to have another odd at the back. So it's going to be 2n plus 5. Now be careful, it's not just any odd. They have to be consecutive. So like 3, 5, 7, in this case 1, 3, 5. Now they have a sum of 63. Now that we have the equation set up, now we can work our problem. So let's combine like terms on the same side. So 2n plus 2n plus 2n is 6n. 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 5 is 9, equals 63. Subtract 9 from 63 and you get 54. And if that helps you, right there is what we did. So the last step is 6n equals 54. We have to divide both sides by 6. So n equals 9. So that means that if I take and put this in, my 3 answers are going to be as such. So 9 times 2 plus 1. So I'm going to go over here and write this in different color ink. So 2 times 9 plus 1 equals 18 plus 1 is 19. 2 times 9 plus 3 is going to be 18 plus 3, which is 21. And 2 times 9 plus 5 is going to end up being 18 plus 5, which is 23. So the answers to your problems are going to be 19, 21, and 23. Now, yes, you had to go through a lot of steps to get there, but that's exactly what you did to get there. Okay, let's look at number 16. It says one angle of a triangle has a measure of 66. The measure of the third angle is 57 more than half the measure of the second. The sum of the angle measures of a triangle is 180. What is the measure of the second angle, and what is the measure of the third angle? All right, so first thing we're going to do is make a diagram and kind of fill it in a little bit. Oops. So one of them is 66. So let's call this one up here 66. And the last angle is going to be, it said x, so half x plus 57, because it's 57 more than half of the other one. All right, so now that we have the three angles identified, we know, hopefully you remember the property, that three angles in a triangle added together equals 180. So when we write this, we're going to have x plus a half x plus 57 plus 66 equals 180. So there's our equation. Let's go ahead and start combining like terms. Well, this here is going to be 1.5x, or 3 over 2x. These two added here are going to give me 123. So the first step, after we combine like terms, we're going to take and subtract the 123 across. So I have 3 over 2x equals 57. Now, we learned this in the last worksheet or last video. We are going to multiply by the reciprocal 2/3. So I'm going to put this over 1 and multiply this by 2/3. 3 goes into 57 19 times. 2 times 19 is 38. So that means x equals 38 degrees. So when I put this back into equation, we know that angle 1 is 66 degrees. We were already given that. Angle 2 is going to end up being 38 degrees. So now we have to find angle 3. Now you can do this one of two ways. What I find to be the easiest is going to take and add those two together and subtract it from 180. However, if you would like to see the algebraic way, here we go. So below it, I'm going to put half times 38, because that's what x was, plus 57. So 19 plus 57 is going to end up giving me 76. So 76 degrees is going to be the last one. All right, folks, I think we have all three angles for that one. And if you got lost on this, remember to go back and pause the video as we go through this. Okay, last one. Your cousin is 8 years older than your brother. 3 years ago, your cousin was twice as old as your brother. How old is your cousin now? How old is your brother now? All right, let's logically think this out. All right, have you had a chance to read it over and look it over? Here we go. This one is a little more thought-provocative. So when we're looking at this, let's call this now and 3 years ago. Okay? So the now, let's talk about cousin and brother. Brother's going to stay X in both of them. Cousin is the one that's going to be the change. Your cousin is 8 years older than your brother. So that's never going to change. So even now, your cousin is still 8 years older than your brother. So we are going to have your brother, once again, like I said, be X, and your cousin is going to be X plus 8. Now, 3 years ago, your cousin was twice as old as your brother. So if your brother's still X, that means your cousin is 2x, because twice means times 2. Now this one's a very unique one because you're going to have to compare new and old. So now and 3 years ago. So if we do now, we're going to have our cousin plus our brother equals 3 years ago, cousin plus brother. As you can see, it's the same setup, but the numbers are different when we plug them in. So x plus 8 for the cousin plus x gives me 2x plus 8. 3 years ago, it was 2x plus x, which gives me 3x. Now we're ready to solve. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and subtract 2x across so that we get them on the same side, and 8 equals x. So your brother was 8 years old at the time, okay? So at the time, 3 years ago, your brother was 8, which means your cousin was 16. Now, it said that was 3 years ago. So if we want to know what the current age is, you have to add 3 to both of the years. So in this case, if x is 8, then it's going to end up being 8 plus 8 plus 3 is going to give me 16 plus 3, which is 19 years old for your cousin. For your brother, he is going to be 8 plus 3, which is 11 years old. So this right here is 3 years ago, and this one is now. All right, so it did take a lot of little bit of things to think and plan out. But as you can see, it's still an algebraic setup. It can be done very simply once you know how you're going to lay it out. All right, folks, great job. Number 7 was challenging, but you hung in there. So get started with your homework, and we will see you next class.